them to see themselves as victims or to be able to let people know that they've been victimized is much more difficult.
The shame that goes along with that, the shame for boys, the guilt for girls, I mean, you know, I'm not just talking generally, is so powerful and really keeps them from bringing this forward. And, you know, it breaks your heart because they live with this secret their whole life. And at some point it does show itself either behaviorally or, you know, a lot of these kids will end up self-medicating because this is a trauma. Who the heck would want to deal with it?
Right. Let's talk about that, what some of the signs are for boys and girls. So parents out there or other adults, if they see these behaviors, they can maybe pull that child aside and say, you know, how are you, what's going on, and try to get them to open up.
I always look at any drastic change in behavior. You know, you have a child who is interested in playing soccer, who's played soccer for 3 years, and then all of a sudden doesn't want to play anymore. Or you have, you know, I always say the drama queen who's going out for the school plays, and all of a sudden, you know, she's not really interested. You know, just any drastic change in behavior is indicative of something, is kind of what I teach kids. I said whether it's something going on at home, something going on in their own head, something going on in their relationship, something is wrong, and it usually begs the question, is everything okay?
And it's important to note that it might not be a sexual assault.
Might not
It could be anything. It could be
my parents are going through a divorce.
Right.
It could be any kind of stressor, and depending on the age, what's happening developmentally for those children and how you know, they react to different things. But usually I always start with any drastic change. If you have a good friend who's not being themselves, it usually means something.
Yeah, and we say to parents, it's a feeling of like, this isn't my kid.
Right.
Like there's something different or off about your child that is not normal, either a drastic change of behavior. Fear all of a sudden about being around a different person or a change of behavior around that person. Unexplained gifts, things like that can be signs. And then the general anxiety, stress symptoms, you know, change in sleep patterns, change in eating patterns, drastic changes in behavior, depression, self-medicating, alcohol, drug abuse, sexual language that isn't age appropriate.
Which, of course, in this day and age is, I mean,
It's
kids
hard,
are, you know,
exposed to
sexting earlier. And,
Yes.
you know, it's amazing. You do have to have those conversations with your children very early on because the world we're in right now with Facebook and Twitter and text messaging, you just have to be on top of them.
And I think it's important to keep the conversations going. I mean, I know with CAP, it's like it gives you that opportunity to have those conversations and to keep having those conversations because, again, I think it's easier when asked about a topic to talk about it than just bring it up out of the blue if it's happening.
Also at an early age, you know, people think, well, I'll do this when my kid is, you know, in 8th grade, and you know, we can talk about those issues. It's really important. The CAP program really talks about that. To talk about, you know, you're entitled to your own body and safety and those sort of issues, and be developmentally appropriate. But we need to start the conversation, and we need to think about this. If every parent and every student had taken the CAP training, had that sort of language and that sort of understanding, the impact it would have. You know, and I always say Needham's a beautiful community with a lot of resources. These things happen in Needham.
Well, I was just going to say that some people might think this doesn't happen here. And I think that happens in every community. People are like, oh, that doesn't happen in my neighborhood and on my street, but it does happen here.
It does happen, it's really scary. And so we would like to think it wouldn't, but you know, as I say, predators live in every community. They spend a lot of time thinking about how they can volunteer for this, how they can be close to kids. And they're very insidious and they're very subtle and they do it over time because they are focused on doing something that they want to achieve and sometimes they're very patient about it and we don't really know. So the Penn State case is an example, the Syracuse case is an example, but here's what I say. Everyone says, oh my goodness, those are terrible things. I don't know what the multiplier is by 10, by 100 in terms of coaches in little towns who have befriended boys, come over, I'll work with you in the gym. I mean, it is really scary. And the impact of that is, for some of these kids, long term. So you have people growing up feeling shameful about themselves, not maturing, you know, stunting their emotional growth, that sort of thing, sexualized behavior, all sorts of acting out behaviors, even becoming predators themselves because it's been normalized. So this is really frightening. And so if you look at some of the statistics about the people in prison who have been violated and some of the people who have all sorts of difficulties, it is really like an eye-opener.
Absolutely. And we do want to stress stress, though, that not every adult who volunteers
Exactly.
is a predator,
Yes.
because
Yes.
there are definitely people out there who
Most are not.
Most are not.
Most are
Most
not.
are not. Most adults who work with children are loving, caring, would never cross boundaries with children. But because there are people out there who are predators, we need to, as a community, as parents, be able to see the red flags when they're there and really keep our eyes open to them, and be able to question it and not let the relationship we have with the person blind us or keep us from sort of dismissing what might be going on.
And I think it's important to follow your gut, as you both have mentioned, because there are some instances where something may happen and you're like, that's a little off, but you don't act on that.
And the reason
it's very hard to believe that someone we know in our community can be doing something, but those statistics, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, is across socioeconomic, race, lines. That's consistent throughout all communities.
Well, think about this. If you said 1 in 4, break their leg, we'd say, wow, this is really serious. Like, what do we have to do differently in this community, in this country? Do it. 1 in 6 break their leg. That is really significant. The other piece is that parents are understandably afraid. What if I accuse someone and I'm wrong?
Right.
And here's what I say to them. If you are in that situation, you have listened to your gut. And if you're wrong, that's fabulous.
Yes.
But you know what? Your gut is telling you something. And parents have a really good gut instinct. They brought up their kids, they have a gut, they know the heartbeat, the cadence of their kids' lives. And what I say to them, if you're going to make that accusation, if you're going to come to Cap or to Katie or to me, you're probably going to be right, because it took a lot of thought, courage and chutzpah in your brain to get there.
And even if you're wrong, you have a maybe mad colleague, mad friend, mad coach, mad whoever, you have a safe kid.
Right.
And to me, that's the most important piece
very
of
good
it.
point.
And we teach children in CAP, one of the things we teach is to pay attention to their gut, to listen to that uh-oh feeling, is what we say to them. And so as grown-ups, one of the best things we can do is model that for our children. Model listening to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, you have the right to do something about it. So, it starts with us as a community being models. I mean, that's the only way we're really going to affect change for children.
Absolutely. If people are at home right now and there might be a child at home or a parent at home and they're saying, I think I know somebody or I'm being victimized, where can they go for help?
There's a lot of places to go for help. We're very lucky to be in the community that we're in. They can go to youth services. For help. They can report it to the Department of Children and Families, which is one of the first places to get some resources. They can go to the police station. They can go to Children's Charter. There are a lot of organizations around that specialize in working with families who've experienced child sexual abuse. We have an adult guide through the CAP program that has a whole list of resources in the back, and we can provide that to people if they call.
And it's very important to call. I mean, it does happen, and again, there could be friends of friends who have been told information, and you just really need to make that call or tell your parent.
And one of the advantages, I hate to say it, the silver lining of the Penn State situation, the Syracuse situation, and any number of local situations, it brings it to the fore. And I am so pleased that we can talk about this, because a generation ago we couldn't talk about it, and that stigma is a big piece to this puzzle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, you can call John's office or our office anonymously. You don't have to give names. You can just pick our brain if that's one place to start. And I agree with John that, we're opening up the conversation. We're starting to break the silence by the Penn State case breaks the silence for a whole group of victims, hopefully, and for communities to really get around this and start talking about it more. And parents say, Katie was saying, you have to continue the conversation with your children. And it's times like these when we see things in the media that we can have an opportunity to bring it up and talk about it. You might be watching a TV show with your child and something comes up. It's a great time to start a conversation.
And it's also important, I think, to mention the wall of silence, which surrounded the Penn State incident, and also happened in the Catholic Church, where things were happening and they just put up the wall and shuffled people around in terms of the church. And then at Penn State, obviously, they just sort of swept it under the rug, if you will. So how do you deal with that wall of silence if it's something that happens in an organization and nothing is, if let's say I see something, I report it, nothing happens.
Keep reporting.
Just what we tell children, tell.
Tell until somebody,
telling.
listens, and find those, I think, teachable moments too. It's like you're watching the news, you're seeing this. We don't necessarily want to talk about it because we don't talk about those things.
Right.
They're great opportunities to talk about those things when things aren't happening, to kind of provide children with education.
And I think, John, you hit on that when people would be astounded if it was 1 in 4 people who broke a leg, but if you say it's 1 in 4 girls who are sexually abused or 1 in 6 boys, people are kind of,
Right, they're standoffish.
I'm going to ignore that.
Yeah, I mean, if we told this community that 1 in 4 girls, anything was happening to them that was dangerous, destructive, hurtful, breaking a leg, I just use that example because it's a physical thing. Everyone can relate to it. They say, my goodness, we have to figure out a way to prevent all those leg injuries, all those broken legs. And so this is serious business. And the thing that breaks my heart, all of us who work with this situation and others, is that this is not just a broken leg that will heal. It takes a lot of time, therapy, support, and for some people it's a lifetime of struggling about how they relate to other people, how they relate to the opposite sex, how they relate to themselves, their own body.
Trusting people.
Trusting, and I'll talk more as a dad than a clinician. It just breaks your heart. It just breaks your heart.
Anything else that we should tell people before we wrap?
I just think that it's important, in a wonderful community like Needham, that we really have an opportunity to help break the silence for children and really affect change in our community by being active participants in addressing this issue, talking about the issue, and really working to protect our children.
I think to reach out to the community resources, if you have a question and if you're going, really, is this happening? Ask the questions. Call, the CAP program, call us, call the police, just to ask a question. It doesn't ever hurt to just gain information.
And it can be anonymous.
And it can be anonymous.
And
Absolutely.
I'll use the word courage. It takes some courage to ask the question because you might not like the answer. So I really ask parents and other adults, have the courage to ask the question.
Absolutely. And we want to encourage people, if they are either being victimized or know somebody that is being victimized or suspects that somebody's being victimized, that they should contact either one of you or the police, but reach out and make it known and get the word out there. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us here. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.